All right, we love getting some time with our man JP Dellacamera, who's heading to Australia as we are weeks away to start Fox's lead play-by-play commentator for the third straight Women's World Cup. JP, so great to have you back on the show.
Thanks, guys, for having me. It sounds like I'm going to see more of New Zealand, actually, than Australia, because that's where the U.S. is going to be based during the group stage, and I'll have their games.
I was going to ask, what's this time like now before you go over there? The preparation, both for the Fox team, for yourself, and then we'll get into the women's team and what's going to go on there.
Prep is different. It's harder because there are so many other events that we're doing. It's not like you have a month off and then you start the Women's World Cup. Like yesterday, I had a European qualifying game. On the weekend, I had an NWSL game. Also on that weekend, another Euro game, and I start Gold Cup games this coming Sunday. So you can't devote all of your time to the Women's World Cup, but knowing ahead of time what I was dealing with, there was a lot of basic prep work that I did for the Women's World Cup. And now you get the rosters, as the USA's roster just dropped today. So then you can be more specific on it. But prep is always, I think it's always difficult, but it's more difficult if you've not done a World Cup before. Unfortunately, I've done quite a few of them. So I'd like to think I know how to at least prep for it.
So let's talk about the Women's World Cup roster for a minute. As part of the dropping of this roster, Alex Morgan is on this team again. She appears to be the only real striker on this team. Is Alex Morgan, is this going to be a problem, or is this team well balanced? And where do you see the next person up if Alex Morgan isn't able to perform or gets hurt?
Well, I would say this to you guys. Normally, I have an unofficial roster that I think has made it. And usually on a 23-player roster, I'll get 21 right, 22. There's always going to be a surprise, right? And I would say to you, the biggest surprise when I look at this roster is that Ashley Hatch didn't make it, because Ashley Hatch is not Alex Morgan, but I think she's the closest player that's among the forwards to Alex Morgan. So if you wanted to replace Alex Morgan with a, let's say, similar type player, she's the one. You look at the other players, Sophia Smith is the starter, first of all. Lynn Williams is not Alex Morgan in terms of the way she plays. Lynn offers so many other different things. Trinity Rodman, amazing talent. Thompson, amazing talent. Rapinoe, the veteran experience, but none of them play like an Alex Morgan. So to me, the biggest surprise that I had was I thought Hatch was a lock, just based on the fact that you need someone, I'm going to say fairly similar to Morgan, because nobody's really, Alex Morgan is a special player. So it's hard to think about who do you have as a backup for her. So I would say that the Hatch omission was the biggest one for me of the misses. Of the additions, I'm surprised, but pleasantly surprised that Savannah DeMello made it. I had been told that she was not going to make it a while ago, but I think that it's possible, and I'm not sure if they will address this. I don't know if Lavelle's situation changed that decision to go for maybe an extra midfielder. You know, they've got Julie Ertz there. Is Julie Ertz going to play in that midfield position, or do they have Ertz in mind as maybe, you know, a center back too? I mean, these are tough decisions, but DeMello's had an amazing year in the NWSL. I knew she'd be on this team at some point. I just didn't think it would be at this World Cup. So biggest surprise for me is that Hatch was not on it. The rest of it, assuming these players were healthy, I had most of them. Like Lavelle hasn't played in a game in, I think it's like a dozen games. So the fact that she's on it is telling me that they must have medical information that indicates she's either able to play and they've kept her out for precautionary reasons, or that maybe she's not able to play right away, but they have confidence that she can play. And Kelly O'Hara, for me, if she was declared healthy, she was always going to be on this team.
Alex Morgan is rounding into form as far as scoring goals. She's had 5 in her last 10 games with her club team, and she had 16 out of the 19 games last year. Where is the next person up as far as where we can expect the most goal scoring?
On this team, I think Sophia Smith. I think this is going to be, it's not a make or break tournament for Sophia because she's so young. She'll probably play in 3 or 4 Women's World Cups, but I think the stage is set for her, as I think it would have been for Kat Macario if she was not injured, to become the new face of this team. And I think Sophia Smith is an amazing talent. She's getting better and better. And I would think that if you're looking for goals in this tournament, you've got to look to Morgan as number 1, and maybe 1A would be Sophia Smith.
So much has changed in the last 4 years. A coaching changeover, a pandemic. They had a bronze when they had higher expectations, retirements from players. At the same time, you're seeing, you mentioned Alyssa Thompson. She'll be the youngest player on the roster at 18. She's the 4th teenager and 2nd youngest player ever to be named to a U.S. roster. Talk about, for fans who have watched over the past decade and kind of got to know that group of women, this seems to be a very different team in terms of age and how they break it down. Can you talk about the changes that this has gone through?
Yeah, I think when you look at it, I looked and I figured the average age, would have dropped quite a bit, especially with Sauerbrunn not being able to play. But it really didn't. You look at it, the age of the team in 2019 is pretty close to what this is now. And the number of players that are over 30, it's not that much different. So you still have the veterans there with the young players. To me, the excitement was about the young players because I think that besides Sophia Smith, I think Trinity Rodman is a terrific young talent. Best is yet to come. I think Alyssa Thompson is fantastic. I've done a few of her games this year. I think Naomi Girma could become one of the best, if not the best center backs in the entire world. And she's young. She's like 23. So there's a lot of good young talent on this team. It's just like, who's going to be the next, whoever you want to say, the next Sauerbrunn, the next Julie Ertz, the next Alex Morgan. We have different types of players for those roles. Again, Morgan plays different, maybe now because she's in her mid-30s. Alex plays a little bit different than these younger players that we're talking about. But when I look at this roster, if you're looking at who's going to be coming into games, it depends on the situation, right? If you need to close out a game and you're up or you're down by a goal, you've got Megan Rapinoe that certainly knows how to play the game, how to protect the lead, how to help her team come from behind, good on free kicks, good on penalty kicks. So you've got Rapinoe. But if not, whoever you're bringing in, in a World Cup game is young and making their debuts, other than Lynn Williams, who's not in her early 20s. But Lynn's also having a fantastic year. But, you've got Trinity Rodman and Alyssa Thompson may have to play a bigger role in this tournament than we might have thought originally if Ashley Hatch had made the team.
So is that going to be a problem? We're used to such a cohesive group of players from the Women's World Cup for so long. Is it going? Yes, youth is a good thing, but the question is this young core that's being added to some of the older veterans going to be enough? Are they going to be able to come together enough to be able to pull this off?
Well, I'm on record as picking them to win, but I've always picked them to win, which means that I was right the last 2 World Cups, but I was wrong in the previous ones where I thought they would win it as well. I think our young players are fearless, and I don't think that pressure bothers them. I think that's one of the beauties, one of the benefits of youth. I think there's enough talent on this team, certainly, to still be the favorites. Remember, there are other teams in this tournament as well that are very strong, but also have a lot of injuries. England is one of those. I think England is, the next best team out there, but they've had several injured players, and who knows how their replacements will perform. But when I look at this team, if you want to be objective and say, where could there be problems? Let me just take a quick look at this. I would say, you're starting 2 talented center backs at the Women's World Cup. One is 23, one is 26. I'll bet you could go back any number of World Cups, and this would be the youngest center back pair that we've had, maybe ever. I'd be surprised if we found a younger center back pairing. Very shocked, especially since, Sauerbrun's been in there now for the last few World Cups. I think Becky Sauerbrun's loss is huge. And I never expected her to play all 7 games. I figured they would rest her, start her in some, maybe not start her in a couple of others to preserve her so she would be there in the final. But it's her leadership, the way she mentors others, her steadiness, her consistency on the field, off the field. That is a huge loss. And I was a bit worried about Becky before because she played, I want to say, the start of the year she was in there. Then she missed 5 or 6 games with a foot injury, which is always tough when you consider, late 30s. Then she came back for a game and appeared to re-injure the same foot. And so at that point, I'm thinking, I don't even know if she's going to get back to the NWSL and play ahead of the World Cup. So I had some worries there, but I did know that she would not be on the team. When she made that announcement, that was a sad day, I think, for U.S. soccer. So I think how do those 2 center backs do will be key, especially since when you look at this roster, who's going to replace either one of them if they get hurt, if they get red carded, if they need a rest? Do they move Julie Ertz back there? Because otherwise, you've got Emily Sonnet, who can play a number of positions, but center back is probably not her best position. You've got O'Hara. She's an outside back. You've got Huerta. She's an outside back. Do you go with 3 in the back instead? I mean, these are decisions that Vlatko Andonovski is getting paid for. And, you succeed or you don't with those choices. But the roster's talented. There's no question. But to me, the center back pairing could have a long way to determine how this team does. And the fact that they don't have a like for Alex Morgan.
It seems like, you talk about some of the storylines for the U.S. team moving in. Some of the traditional big names have storylines going in too. Canada's players are in open conflict with their federation. They had the resignation of their president. France fired its coach. England has lots of injuries like the U.S. going in. The Netherlands said in April one of their stars is going to miss it. The Jamaican team have concerns over their preparation. Yep. What should we look out for in terms of the other teams in this tournament?
Yeah, and since Jason's bringing us down, give us some positives too.
I'm Mr. Cloudy today.
I got to tell you, I mean, it's a great field. I think England or Germany. I said the other day at a Fox event that I picked the U.S. to win, but it's not going to be easy. And neither was 2019. People don't remember the 2-1 wins in all those knockout games. And if Alyssa Nair doesn't stop Houghton's penalty kick, maybe England is playing in the final, not the United States. I mean, those were close games. That Spain game, they could have lost. Any of those 3 games in the knockout stage, they could have lost. So it wasn't an easy Women's World Cup. I think the stats show that they never lost, 7-0-0. As I remember, I don't think they ever trailed in a game. I mean, the numbers seemed like this was an easy run. It was not, and this won't be either. I think England is very good. The team that won the Euros, if they were intact, they're every bit as talented as the U.S. Their injuries, we'll see who steps up to replace those injured players. Germany finished second in the Euros. They were very strong. In fact, the Germany women right now are looking way better than the German men are. They've had their struggles as of late. France, as you mentioned, has a new coach, but plenty of talent. And I think those players will respond to this new coach who we saw at the Men's World Cup. I think they'll respond because they were never a big fan of Diak, who was the previous coach. Didn't play their best probably for her, and several players wanted nothing to do with France, who have now since come back under Reynal. I think Spain is good, and they would be better if all of their players were welcomed back, but that's still a problem. I think Brazil under Pia Sundhage could surprise some people. Sweden is always there. And then you've got the host nation, Australia. I think Sam Kerr is the best attacking player that will be at this Women's World Cup. She can carry this team on her back. Tony Gustafson is their head coach. He was underneath Jill Ellis at the last World Cup. They've had some good results. They could go far with the home crowd and the home support. I do like Canada. I think the only problem with Canada is what you mentioned, at odds with the Federation. Sometimes that helps. Sometimes they go in there with it's us against everybody mentality, and that helps. But, Christine Sinclair is 40 years old. How big of a role will she have? Sophie Schmidt, mid-30s. How big of a role? They've got a great goalkeeper in Kaylin Sheridan, whose club team coach, San Diego, Casey Stoney, says that she's the best in the world. If you have the best goalkeeper in the world, you can win these games 1-0 and do well. But Canada, for me, a little bit older and a lot of turmoil. And so, if you deepen that pool, could they win it? They wouldn't be in my top. For me, it's USA. I'd be surprised myself. If the USA doesn't win it, it's going to be England or Germany. Just opinion.
JP, in addition to talking about Women's World Cup, we want to talk to you about a couple of recent events and how they're going to play going forward. The first being what happened with the U.S. men's national team playing against Mexico. There have been repeated incidents with Mexico, with the fans and the players, the team itself, and the last game had to be stopped. At what point do you think FIFA is going to step in and do something drastic? My suggestion, which nobody's ever going to do, is to say to Mexico, if you can't get this under control, the host countries will be Canada and the U.S., and you can forget it. But exactly when is FIFA going to step in and say that you have got to stop this?
Well, clearly what they've tried to do hasn't worked, right? Whether it's FIFA or actually, it should be CONCACAF. It's a bigger CONCACAF problem for me than it is for FIFA because it's happening in our region. So Mexico has made a boatload of money, especially playing games in the United States where they always draw great crowds. I mean, look at the crowd they had the other day. You tell me what was the difference in the game that Mexico played the U.S. and the USA-Canada final. Did you notice anything different?
It was amazing. The stadium was empty for the Canada game. I thought that they were doing the pregame while the game was going on because there was nobody in the seats.
It was about 30,000 less seats occupied for the Canada game than Mexico. And this was the final, right? So, it's clear that Mexico makes money. They make money in the United States, and fining them $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 is nothing, right? So what can you do? What are your options? Even though World Cups are expanding, and they're always going to get in, take away all their home games. No more home games in World Cup qualifying. Play them all on the road. That's one drastic measure that you could do, right? Second thing that you could do is ban them from games in the United States. Again, they make a fortune. There have been times here where they've played, 6, 7, 8 games in the summer series, sellout crowds. They're making a fortune. But also, probably U.S. Soccer is making money on those games. Probably CONCACAF is too. But that's the only way that you can do it. And I want to stress something else to you guys. It's not a majority of the Mexican fans. It's not. It's a minority of the Mexican fans, whatever number that is. But let's say it's 300 out of 30,000. Those 300 make a lot of noise. But, we're painting the broad brush against all of them. And to me, that's not fair. But let me go back to the game itself. I was texting friends and they were texting me back and forth. And I said at one point, this is going to get nasty. This is going to get really bad. And there's going to be several more cards issued. By several, I didn't know what that number was. I think after I texted, there were 4 reds after I texted and maybe 3 or 4 yellows because that referee was way in over his head, lost control of it. And all you have to do is know this. With the score 3-0, why would you add 12 minutes of stoppage time?
That was when I started texting people.
That is ridiculous. 12 minutes of stoppage time on a 3-0 game. And I'll tell you something else. It's a referee's decision, right? Let's say it was 1-0, and now they're on their second homophobic chant. Stop the game. Stop the game.
And it was already 9v9 at that point. It made no. I agree with you. It made no sense.
It was stupid. So think about it this way: if there was an injury, right? Somebody gets hurt, player, coach, fan, by something thrown from the stands, or just a crazy red-carded tackle like we saw, towards the end of that game. That's on the referee. That's all on him. 12 minutes of stoppage time was foolish. Stop it on the first homophobic chant. Thankfully, he stopped it on the second one. But I got to tell you, refereeing a USA versus Mexico game, not easy. One of the most difficult games to call. It is the most difficult game to call in North America. No question. I couldn't even tell you what comes in second in this region. So there's only two referees, not two. There's only two countries in CONCACAF where you could have a referee that could handle that game. The two countries are USA and Mexico, and they're not allowed to call that game for obvious reasons. So you have to find the best referee in where? Costa Rica, Trinidad, El Salvador, Panama, right? Who's never called a game of that stature and hope he's up to the level. Not happening. Bring in somebody from another confederation to handle it. Because you can't have a USA or Mexico referee in that game. Nobody's going to accept that. Would they accept a referee from CONMEBOL? Why not?
You could see that ref was over his head from the game, way that game started till the very end. We talk about how it went, and at the end, sort of the preemption to the game was the announcement of the leak that Greg Berhalter, after an independent search and an investigation, and we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to talk to these people, he's coming back. So talk to us about how you think the search went. There was some criticism that because it went so long, it put the U.S. at a disadvantage going back to the same guy. What are your thoughts on the coaching search and the decision to make a return to what they were doing?
I never had any problems with Greg. I think had it not been for the Reyna incident, my opinion, his contract would have been extended. I think he got us as far as I expected. We would have gone in the last World Cup. Remember, we were young. Remember, we played against the Netherlands. I keep hearing people say he was outcoached. We were outplayed by better talent. Netherlands were on an unbeaten run at that time. Take the Dutch roster, take the USA roster, and as much as I always like to think that the USA is going to win, I had the Netherlands winning that game. So Berhalter took them far. I could see the love that his players had for him at the end of the game. You could feel that. And so I thought, he's the guy for the next one. The Reyna thing changed my thought. I didn't know if that could be overcome. The hope is that it can be.
They apparently still haven't talked, which kind of concerns me.
Well, if they haven't talked, that tells me that this thing just did happen when it did. Because I think if they had said to Greg in January, don't worry, you're coming back, or in February, don't worry, you're coming back, maybe he does try to patch things up. So I think this happened when it did. I do disagree, though, with people that say that we didn't waste a lot of time. I disagree. We lost, 6 months where he could have been in charge. So if you're telling me that you spent 4 months, 5 months, on a search, and you come back with Greg, my question is, what took you so long to come back to Greg? So who knows, what's factual, what they're telling us, what they're not telling us. I have no problem with Greg being the head coach. I think the fact that they named him tells me that they believe he and Reyna can patch things up. And I think that they will. Gio Reyna is a superb talent. And for anybody that didn't think he was, I hope they watched the Nations League, because he's a difference maker. He's a starter. I also don't believe some of the stories that came out that Greg told him he wasn't going to play. That doesn't sound right to me. Maybe he said, not going to play much, or you're not going to start, or whatever. But why would you tell anybody entering a World Cup that you're not going to play when you know that injuries, red cards, COVID, whatever it is, you might need this guy? So don't believe everything you hear. Don't believe everything you read. The truth is like somewhere in there. Sorry, I'm giving you a long answer, but I was okay with Greg. I just think to end up where we did, I think we wasted a lot of time.
All right. Well, before we let you start practicing the little shrimp on the Barbie, Messi is coming to this country in a month. I think it's, in a month. Do you see him as somebody who's going to change the direction in an upward direction? Or do you see this look, I'm the generation who I remember seeing Pele play in the Meadowlands. We've heard this about several people. We heard it about Beckham. I know Messi's going to make Inter Miami better. Is he really going to change the trajectory of the MLS?
Well, it's a lot of pressure. And here's what I would say. When Pele came to America, and I remember it, very well as a much younger person, but the North American Soccer League was nothing compared to MLS, nothing. Pele really saved a lot of things, when he came to this country. Beckham helped to save the league, but more for his, persona, who he was off the field as much as on the field. David Beckham was a terrific player, excellent player, but he's not Messi, he's not Pele. Right. But MLS needed Beckham then. And when they write the history of Major League Soccer, there should be an entire chapter on David Beckham, because after Beckham came, teams started building more stadiums, more training facilities. They brought in, the Thierry Henrys of the world and other big names that were not coming were not for David Beckham. Messi's in a different category. MLS is already a success. They are. I mean, average attendance, new stadiums, new facilities, the way MLS is thought of in other parts of the world is amazingly different than when Beckham came here. When Beckham came here, they used to call it the Major League Soccer, the MLS, or they would say overseas, that league in America. Now people know it's MLS. You can watch their games in all these countries. Where Messi, I think, can move the needle. I mean, they're going to set records for scalped tickets, the price of tickets. That will be amazing. That will be an amazing influence. He'll sell out stadiums that have a hard time selling out, right? I haven't looked at the schedule, so I don't know where he's playing, when, where, who's going to shift their games to a bigger stadium maybe. His home team is one of those teams that will probably shift games to a bigger stadium. So he's going to move the needle for attendance. What MLS is hoping for, and nobody knows, is does he move the Apple subscriptions? Does he make this destination? Are people going to buy the subscriptions because they want to watch him play for Inter Miami? And what happens when he leaves in 2 years or 2.5 years? Do they stay? I think that's going to be the test, because the media exposure he gets is going to be incredible. Every game he plays in, I cannot imagine an MLS city where he doesn't sell out at high ticket prices. So that's going to happen, right? If the game's on Fox, yes, it will set a ratings record. I don't know how Amazon, I don't know if they have ratings or if it's just based on subscription. I've not seen anything, so I couldn't tell you that. But I think that's the number, or that's the area that will determine how much of an impact Lionel Messi has.
Yeah, Apple hasn't really released much in terms of the audience or their subscription count, but that for them is the metric. And what happens in 2 years? They hope that people forget that their Apple TV auto renews for the next year when Messi does decide to be here. JP, we can't wait to hear you on the call from New Zealand or Australia or wherever they have you doing the call. Always appreciate you making a little time for us, and I look forward to seeing as the tourney goes.
Thank you, guys. Keep in touch.